So we're getting ready for our trip today, loading up on sugar. And Brad, why don't you tell them what we're going to try to catch today?
Today we're going to try to catch some flounder. We're going to go with the Varels again.
Yep. Our friends from the last video.
With the ladyfish.
The ladyfish video. And what else are we going to try to catch?
Gag groupers.
Gag groupers. That would be awesome. Another really big one. It'd be great to have another video right after this with a huge gag grouper in our hands. And today is all artificials. So, you know, I was talking to my wife earlier this morning about that. We're going to go out and we're going to make today simple. We're not going to get our hands fishy. We're not going to have to get a bait cooler. We're going to use gulps and trolling lures. And we're going to see if we can produce some fish, just keeping it really simple and clean. So we'll check back in. Maybe, what do you think, when we get down to the ramp? Let's get some water in this background. All right, guys, ready? Here we go. Underappreciated fish in the bucket.
I don't want to fish. Fine already.
Grunt fish. So I said I would start getting better at this, talking a little bit more about what rigs we use out there to catch some of these fish, and I wanted to just show a couple here that I like. We use these for trolling for the grouper. This particular color combo is like orange, kind of yellowish color, depending on the angle you're looking at it. And this is a Rapala X-Rap Magnum 30 But really, you know, there's lots of different styles. Got a tangled mess of a few more here. You know, these are Man's brand. As long as they've got a really big lip, they'll get down deep enough for the grouper. And I mean, for years I've been fishing them with some 60-pound leader that runs to a swivel to go to the main line. But yesterday we were also just tying it straight to the braid, and I really didn't notice too much of a difference. So I think I'm gonna keep on experimenting with it. But nonetheless, you know, just different color combo, same Rapala lure. You know, I think that when you're trying to troll these types of lures, you can do more than two, but two at least gives you a fighting chance of not snagging up. And I like to troll these at different speeds depending on the current conditions, and you know, I don't think there's really any set number for the speed that you should troll these at. But one indicator that's very reliable under any conditions is the rod tip. So I'm looking mainly at the rod tip to see how hard it's wobbling. And if you get a really good, solid, hard wobble, that's what you want to see. The rod tip will also tell you stuff about if you're building up weeds on the treble hooks, or if the lure is going down so far that it's tagging the bottom, which is real bad because these will get hung up really easy. You'll kind of see it when it's weeding up, where the wobble in the rod tip will not be so intense back and forth, but instead kind of dull out. If it starts tagging the bottom, you'll see the rod tip go from the normal wobble to all of a sudden just kind of digging down for a second or two while the lure's digging in. So the rod tip, I think, is the best one. And you got to kind of just try a few different speeds. Also remember that depending on the direction you're going, the current may be going in a different direction, so the lure could be ripping through the water really fast, even though your speed over ground is 3 miles an hour. The lure could be swimming against the current, and it seemed like it more's going, you know, 10 miles an hour, which most of these lures, anything over about, I don't know, 6, 7 miles an hour, and they start popping out of the water and not swimming right. So generally, I guess, usually between like 3 and 6 miles an hour speed over ground. Another trick with using these lures in tandem is that you want to use one lure long and one lure short. The reason you do this is because if you picture these lures swimming side by side, and now one is further out, when you turn the boat, these lures can pass over each other without the lines tangling. Right, so if I turn the boat this way, this lure can swing around, and if I go the other way, this lure can swing on the long lure can always swing inside the corner and clear the short line. So what I'll do is I'll get the boat at the right trolling speed, and then I will count the line out. So I'll say 20 seconds out in free spool on the long line, and then maybe 10 seconds on the short line. And when I lock the reels in, you can see the angle of the line will show you if you've got a good separation of distance. The far lure should have a shallower angle as it comes to the water. So just a couple of tricks for trolling two and not getting snagged up. You know, a lot of times you're taking the boat and trying to do a hairpin turn, basically, so you can come back over structure or whatever bottom you're fishing with these things. So you end up making these sharp turns, and you know, some people try to make like figure eights, but you know, I don't know, when I'm fishing, I tend to not want to just stick on a pattern as much as sort of look at my side scan and look at my down scan sonars and decide where I want to go based on what I'm seeing. So end up with a bunch of wacky turns going everywhere. And if you're not separating the distance of these lures, they crash into each other and get all mangled and tangled up. And these things are lovely if you're fishing them with braid. And I mean that sarcastically, when they tangle, because then they like to spin around each other, and they come in just, you got to cut the line most of the time. So you're wasting time out there. And if you're out there with your kids, you know, this is the time when you kind of hear, Daddy, I don't like this isn't fun, and you know, and it gets stressful, and you just want to avoid that. The whole point of using these lures and not catching live bait or using squid or something was that it was more simple and still effective. So just that simple trick of spacing them out can save the headache and sort of make everyone have a better time. So that's these deep diver lures. I've caught tons of stuff on them. I mean, we don't really do much pelagic trolling up here, but I like using these when I'm down south for pelagics. But up here, this is really, in my opinion, kind of a search lure, you know? You can kind of just blindly troll these things, and once you figure out for the depth you're in and you know the speed you want to go and all that, you know, you kind of dial it in, you can just tool around, you know, and find new spots. And it's really fun. If you don't know an area really well, you can just slap, you know, even just one out to keep it simple, and you're kind of searching, you know, and I found a lot of good spots that way. So I like to usually keep one of these always rigged up on a decently heavy rod. I just use a piece of junk for trolling these things because I like to use my nice rods for holding in my hand, and most of the time this thing's just going to be, you know, in a rod that's sitting in the rod holder. Plus it's wobbling like crazy, so, you know, I find that some of these cheaper rods that have a little bit faster action throughout the rod, they almost give the lure a better action, like they got a little more give. Caught king mackerel, caught cobia. One time I caught a flounder on one of these things. I don't know if it snagged it because it was going on the bottom and hitting the bottom, or if the flounder actually tried to eat it, but I don't have a picture of that, but that was a long time ago. And probably the only other thing I would mention is color. Now, there's tons of other aspects about these lures. I'm not going to go into them. I just want to kind of give some tips that I use, but color. And I meet guys that'll say, oh yeah, color doesn't matter. And then I'll meet other people that say, color's everything. I always use the pink, or I always use the redhead. And I don't really care. Personally, I just buy kind of whatever's on sale or I got around. But I do notice that day to day, trip to trip, different colors produce better than others. That's my observation. I mean, this orange lure, for example, caught 3 times the fish, both sea bass and gag grouper yesterday, that the redhead caught. But yet there's been other days where this redhead is the king, the winner. So I like to just have a few different color combos, just handy to try different stuff. This bluish kind of one that looks like a little bit like a sardine or a cigar minnow. It's kind of a nice color as well. Bright pink is another one. I should have probably also mentioned size. You know, these things come in all different sizes, and you can usually tell how far it's going to go down by the size of the lip. If the lip is gigantic, this thing is going to go way down, regardless of how big the actual body is. If the lip is small, then it's going to go down a little bit. And usually on the box, they'll tell you, you know, this one called a Magnum 30. So my guess is it probably rides at about 30 feet of depth when it's optimized, and has about probably 150 feet of line out. And, you know, I'm not measuring how much line I have out, so I'm just kind of going this by feel, but you can buy larger and smaller lures, and I find that these 30s in general, they ride great in anything from like 20 to 45 feet of water, so it doesn't have to be the exact depth. And I also find that sometimes, just like with the colors, the size of the body will really dictate whether or not you actually get a lot of bites. Sometimes they just want this gigantic thing. I've got a huge pink one I can grab in a second and show you. And then sometimes they want like a little tiny one, and they're just going for it. So I think you're also, you know, playing a game of sort of trying to match the hatch for the bait that the fish are seeing, just to try to make it as natural as possible. So hopefully that helps some of you out there. These trolling lures are great. I've been using them for a long time, and I know so many of you out there use these, so don't think that I'm claiming to be a pro here, but you know what I'm talking about if you use these lures. They work great, but if you kind of don't know how to use them and how to run them correctly, they can almost seem like more of a headache than they're worth. So, hope that helps. All right. So let's see, the 2 biggest ones, the grunt and the sea bass.
Dad, look look at that pretty size.
You can see the difference between them here.
The other one's pooping.
It's a nice sea bass right here.
It's pooping.
Decent sized grunts. We're gonna get these cleaned up real quick.
Hey, I just saw one pooping there.
Why don't you go ahead and open up that bag for us? It's tempting to get crazy, but I'm just going to give this fish exactly what it really wants, and that is a bath in some very hot oil. Flour, egg, breadcrumbs. It's that simple. Alright, so just want to show you what we used on this fish. This is Parmesan cheese, nothing special, just this is already grated up. Gluten-free breadcrumbs. You know, we're not really gluten-free. We take gluten into consideration, but not really gluten-free, but it just comes out good. And then the gluten-free flour. We got this delicious fish. This oil is preheated. Let's I think it's important. You gotta kind of like gently lay it in the bath so it doesn't stick to the bottom. Works better that way. See how that gluten-free just like stays on too? Oh, flour. We got a protective wiener dog around here. Gilbert, come here. Gilbert, come here. Come here. Let's let him sniff it. Round one is complete. Round two shall begin.
They get so crispy.
I like how they don't make the oil all dirty. You know, some of the stuff you put on there, some like other options, when you drop it in there, you get a cloud of topping that comes off right away.